Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Moving to Cloud Financials, Adoption, Expectations, and Guidance, sponsored by Workday. With that, I'm pleased to turn the call over to your host today, Bill Sinnott, Senior Director, Research for Financial Executives International. Bill, please go ahead.
Thank you, Kirk. Good afternoon, or good morning, depending on your time zone. As you know, in the world of finance and accounting, we are on the cusp of a major technology shift. Today's accounting systems were designed more than 30 years ago for GAAP accounting. Since then, there have been significant changes in finance. Globalization has become the norm. Regulatory requirements continue to change and evolve. Business structure continues to morph at hyperpace, including mergers, acquisitions, and spin-offs. The role of the CFO has changed significantly, and new technologies have emerged. We are now at a point where more and more companies are looking to upgrade or replace current systems to adapt to these changes. In today's webinar, industry experts from Saugatuck Technology will share the results from their latest survey on finance technology. Along the way, they address several key questions. What are the most significant changes facing finance today? Are existing financial systems impeding progress? What is the latest sentiment toward the cloud, and how quickly is it being adopted? What are the benefits of running finance in the cloud? So with that as a backdrop, I'd like to introduce today's presenters. William S. or Bill McNee, founder and CEO of Saugatuck Technology, and Bruce Guptill, Senior Vice President and Head of Research at Saugatuck Technology. Now, as a means of introduction, Bill McNee is President and CEO of Saugatuck, which is a subscription research and advisory firm focused on emerging industry trends and disruptive technologies driving change in enterprise IT. Over the past few years, Mr. McNee has helped spearhead the firm's research into evolving business models as a result of the shift to software as a service and cloud computing. Prior to founding the firm in 1999, Bill spent 11 years with Gartner, most recently as Group Vice President and Research Fellow, responsible for guiding the firm's overall research strategy. Prior to Gartner, Mr. McNee held strategic planning, financial management, and marketing positions at CBS, HBO, ComShare, and the Institute for Social Research. Bruce Guptill is Senior VP and Head of Research at Saugatuck. Bruce is responsible for research strategy and operations. He is a leading expert on the business of IT, especially changes in IT user and buyer behavior and their effects on IT provider business strategies, models, ecosystems, and offerings. So with that introduction, I'd like to turn it over to Bill McNee, CEO of Saugatuck Technology. Bill?
Well, Bill, thanks so much for that introduction, and it's great to be working with the FEI again. I guess we've worked off and on together for more than 10 years, and going back to my Gartner years, in fact, and it's great to be here today. So let me thank the FEI for helping to host our event today, and more importantly as well, our sponsor, Workday, for helping bring us all together for this event. I'm just going to make a few introductory remarks and then pass it to my colleague Bruce, who will take us through some of the findings. But let me provide some context for today's event. Back earlier in the first quarter, we were commissioned by Workday to develop an independent research program that Saugatuck then undertook to go out and survey the 250 senior finance and IT executives to focus on understanding and scoping their perception of existing finance systems, their suitability in an environment of accelerating business and technology change, and to assess the degree to which cloud-based finance systems are deemed suitable for to finance and changing needs. I think we succeeded in our mission in that the survey that resulted, that got conducted in March and April, we ended up with 271 responses, about half of them IT, half of them finance. The survey results today did focus on companies with 1,000 to 10,000 employees, but we had a very balanced distribution across all industries. So this is not for super small companies. These are not for super big companies. We view this as kind of mid-size into the small, large enterprise segment is kind of what the data will represent today. So let me pass it to my colleague Bruce, who can take you through some of the high-level findings from the research.
Well, thank you very much, Bill, and thank you, Bill Sinnott, as well. Again, as Bill said, it's a honor and a privilege to be working with the FEI. What we're going to do is walk through a series of slides that we will show you the high level, as Bill mentioned, of our survey results, and actually of our analysis of these results based on the 10 plus years that we've been working in these fields. And we'll end up with some guidance. And along the way, as Kirk, our producer, mentioned, we will have a poll question. So please stay tuned for that. But let's get to the net results of the survey. First and foremost, the finance department, finance leaders, finance organizations tell us again and again and again, they need more and better ways to deliver value to the enterprise. This is for a variety of reasons. As Bill Sinnott mentioned, the roles of finance are changing. The competitive environments, the regulatory environments that we find ourselves in have been changing, and the pace of change is accelerating. The legacy finance systems that we have are seen by both finance and IT leaders as unable to keep pace with these current business demands. And if you can't keep pace with what's going on now, you're going to have even more trouble keeping pace with what's going to come, especially as the breadth and depth of these changes increase and the speed accelerates. So the consideration and use of cloud for finance and by finance departments and users is growing much faster than we had previously seen. We've been doing our annual cloud and software as a service surveys worldwide for about 8 or 9 years now. And we've been seeing a steady creep, if you will, from the peripheral types of applications closer and closer, but not quite into the core finance and other what we call money applications within the enterprise. That's accelerating as the pace of change accelerates. And it turns out that finance and IT leaders both have very clear expectations regarding how cloud can and does deliver value to finance and what cloud solutions and providers must deliver in order for finance to be able to deliver that value. So let's take a dive into some of the data slides and see what the world is telling us is happening. One of the questions that we asked, you can see each of these slides will have the survey question at the top and a representation of the data in one or more forms in the main body. You can read as well as I can, so we won't do word for word on every page, but the bottom line here is what best describes the status of your current financial management systems. The net here, 82% of the respondents are changing or have changed. Basically, not happy, not completely pleased with their finance systems. Only 18%, as you can see, are happy with existing systems and have no changes planned. But it's a minority, it's a significant minority, but as you can see, the majority, very clear majority, are telling us that the existing finance systems that they have are being rethought, re-examined, and increasingly replaced. Let me pause for just a moment. Bill McNee, any comments or highlights that you'd like to add before we move to the next slide?
Well, to your point, separate from this survey, we do conduct our annual Saugatuck annual cloud buyer demand survey. And frankly, the results as it relates to the pace of either adopted or planned adopted change in core systems of record was higher than I would have expected. I mean, this was the survey that we're focusing on today that was sponsored by Workday, exclusively targets finance and IT executives, and it is actually faster than what some of our other overall studies are showing.
Agreed. And the reasons for this are going to be examined in the next couple of slides. For example, why is it that the finance and IT executives that we talked with are considering the change? Well, the bottom line is that the current systems can't deliver don't deliver cost effectively what finance needs because the roles are changing. The finance roles are changing. They're expanding. We're getting into more and different areas of the enterprise. We're getting into more and different roles and responsibilities as regards not just, if you will, traditional finance, but more strategic and business planning, more leadership roles, and more publicly facing roles in many cases as well, regardless of whether or not the company itself is a publicly traded company. As you can see, what we've done here is we've aggregated the replies or the responses in the survey to this particular question. We asked them, as you can see from the top, on a range of 5, from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And what we see here is the aggregate strongly agree and agree responses. The bottom line is that the value of finance depends on useful business data and guidance. There's more roles, or should be more directly involved in business strategy and planning. And note that there is a theme here. Finance should be more involved, should be more integrated, needs to provide more and better value. The role of the finance organization should be more visible. What's holding us back is what's on the next page. The current systems simply are not up to today's needs, let alone what it is that we expect to see over the coming years. So does your company's financial management system hinder finance functions in any of the following ways? And you can see from top to bottom what those means are. And we did allow people to select multiple responses here, which is why you have a broad range of response percentages. But the net here is that the systems that we have aren't flexible enough. There are too many interfaces and too many ways of doing things, too many forms of data. Basically, they don't allow us to cost-effectively deliver what we need in terms of speed, in terms of integration across systems within finance and between finance and the rest of the enterprise, or beyond the enterprise to our trading partners, our customers, regulators, and other entities that we need to deal with. And of course, they're not cost-effectively adaptable, or not as cost-effectively adaptable as some of the new and more, let's say, modern types of solutions are. Bill McNee, am I overlooking anything here?
Well, I would just kind of supplement what you had to say. The Harvard Business Review has done some very interesting work lately, looking at what the business, what is going on in the business. And we often throw around these marketing cliches that, cloud helps deliver greater adaptability and flexibility and all these idioms, But the reality is that business is changing. The pace of business is accelerating. And the ability for certain functional domains within the business to be able to support a changing business environment are at different paces of adoption of newer technologies in support of that mission. So, for example, we view in some ways, in a parallel kind of the adoption of cloud itself. If you look at the earliest areas that have adopted cloud technologies that have provided some greater flexibility and adaptability capabilities and the ability to integrate systems, it was adopted in sales and marketing, and then has moved on to human resource management and HCM and talent management. And we believe that we're entering a period where in finance, and in particular around core systems of record, we're moving from kind of an early adopter phase to kind of an early mainstream phase over the next few years. Clearly, finance has adopted a lot of point solutions, but now we're starting to look at, many organizations are looking, because of the restrictions and some of the challenges of their existing architecture and this expanded mission and a changing set of business mandates, potentially looking at core systems of record in finance as well in terms of their ability to support that mission.
Oh, and Bill, that leads very nicely into our next slide, which is, where do our survey respondents, our participants, see the business changing? Because what we want to find out, and what we think we have found out with this survey, and it maps very well to some previous surveys that we've done over the years. What are the triggers? What are the events that shift, that change, that push into evolution, if you will, what the enterprise is, what it does, and how it does it. And as you can see down the left-hand side, there's a range of events or event types. If we can sum it all up, we'd have to say that multiple changes are occurring on multiple business fronts, and this is nothing new. This is something we've always had to deal with. But there are some significant forces at play, as Bill was just mentioning, new and emerging regulations, new or evolving business requirements, whether as a result of those regulations or as a result of some of the other factors and events that you see here. New executive management, rapid growth, global expansion, changing of the structure, business restructuring or divestitures, mergers, acquisitions, spin-offs. You add all these up, and there are basically two forces driving change and accelerating change on multiple fronts to an extent that we haven't seen in previous years or decades, especially during the IT era of the last 40 to 50 years. And that is a combination of growth and business structure or restructuring changes. So it's pretty clear, pretty clear that some changes are desired, some changes are needed in what we have, in the tools that we have to do our jobs as finance leaders and professionals. If we wanted to start shaping what it is those tools should look like, let's start here on page 7. What are the three most compelling, or what are, let's just say, the most compelling business benefits of cloud, or as a lot of people still mention, SaaS, software as a service, financial management systems? Well, first and foremost, and forever, we have to reduce the cost and complexity of running the finance department. We have to next be flexible. We have to be more flexible than the traditional systems, because that enables us to develop and refine and promote more flexibility in terms of our operating characteristics, in terms of our processes, in terms of our relationships and communications. That in turn allows us to better optimize resources, the third one down. So if we can optimize our resources, we can finally be the agile business that we've wanted to be, to paraphrase what Bill was telling us before. We can better and more effectively and more cost effectively extend our reach, our control, our span of communication and coordination within our own organization, then of course within the enterprise and throughout the enterprise, whether it's global by itself or it has more and more global partners. Bill, anything you'd like to add to this slide?
No, I think this is pretty straightforward. I do want to just let everybody know we've gotten a couple questions come through on whether or not there'd be copies of the slides later. And yes, a recording of the webinar, including the slides integrated into it, will be available on the FEI website, most likely before the end of the week. And a subsequent follow-on report that Saugatuck will author likewise will be available within a couple weeks on the Workday website as well.
Well, thank you very much, Bill. If I was going to bottom line this slide, as we like to say in our business, if I was going to sum everything up about this, cloud fits. Cloud fits what finance wants and needs to do as its roles and responsibilities change, and most importantly, as the business structure, the business management, the business mission and goals change around the finance organization.
You know, Bruce, I'll tell you what, could you go back one slide? You know, what's interesting, if I were to kind of think about some parallels for the companies, and most of the people on the call, probably somewhere in your organizations, there's already been pockets of cloud adoption, maybe even in some of those earlier waves that I talked about in sales and marketing or around some point solutions, even in finance or in HCM, human capital management. What's really interesting is that oftentimes, and we've seen that, and Bruce and I have been covering the kind of enterprise markets for a number of years, and in particular the transition toward the new master architecture. And in our opinion, it's not just about cloud. It's about cloud. It's about mobile. It's about social. It's about analytics. It's about really all of those things that are helping to drive new value propositions, and that is driving the adoption of these new solutions. You know, what's interesting is that what often early on is a prerequisite or a key driver, is the number one on this list. Reduce cost. Lowers the cost and complexity of running finance. Well, you could apply that to any of these functional domains. But once most organizations actually adopt these technologies, that tends to, while cost is always going to be an important criteria, especially in finance, obviously given the scope of responsibilities in finance, oftentimes it becomes a secondary benefit. And the benefits instead are derived by really the ability to go places that you couldn't go before. It might very well be around analytics. In the case of finance, probably social technologies aren't as important, although maybe that could help with some budgeting capabilities and other kind of sub-functions. But cost, while a leading driver early on, ultimately in the longer run is superseded by broader business benefits that this new master architecture is delivering.
Definitely in full agreement. And that master architecture is enabling significant change in not just what we have, but where it comes from and how we use it. And page 8 is a representation of some additional Saugatuck research that began several years ago regarding where the new business software, and actually we have some similar types of slides that look at all types of new business IT, and over the course of the next several years, from 2012 to 2016, of course, in this slide. And this acts as a reminder that not everything in all aspects of the business is going to cloud immediately, or not everything is going to go to cloud in the near future. If you go out to the year 2016, for example, you follow the blue columns, there's definitely a steady, rapid decline of people's preference for on-premises IT, whether it's business software or other business IT. But it doesn't go away. And so the systems that we have, or the systems that we are going to acquire, build, and refine for our finance functionalities and capabilities, have to be able to adapt to this changing marketplace through this hybrid environment that's growing, so cloud plus on-premises, to something that is edging steadily over time closer to pure play cloud. And we'll eventually get there. Let's say, when we say pure play cloud, let's say, 80-something% of business software and systems will be in the cloud at some point. We're not exactly sure when, but it is accelerating. But the systems that you put in place have to be adaptable to be able to function cost effectively in that kind of environment. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I was just going to make sure that we bring some clarity to exactly what the question says here. The question that we asked is my company's preference for deploying new business software. So we're not suggesting that on-premise portfolios are going to go down. Listen, the reality is, as we all know, that stuff that's in place just doesn't go away, or it really takes work to displace them. And in many cases, it doesn't make sense to displace them unless the systems are so old and creaking and are impeding the ability to really support business change. This is really about where is the new investment going. And in terms of the preference for new solutions, clearly on-prem is falling. But the reality is that very few companies can move to a brand new cloud-only footprint. I mean, if you have a divestiture and you're spinning out a division as a new completely separate entity, boy, they can start, they're a greenfield, right? $1 billion division, spun out, they can do whatever they want to do. And if they have their preference, and we've talked to a lot of companies, they would prefer, if they don't have to put in a data center, they would avoid it like the plague, most companies, right? So the reality is most organizations are somewhere in the middle, and they are going to have a very large and much of it very productive large enterprise and mid-sized enterprise on-prem footprint, and they're going to supplement that with areas of value in a very concerted and a synergistic manner, combining on-prem and cloud-based assets. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, in some ways, integration becomes the key linchpin, helping to build the bridge between these islands so that they aren't islands of automation, but are something that are coordinated and high value is passed between the various environments.
And to supplement that, before we move to the next slide, Bill, it not only is this are we seeing this change toward this new architecture and these new ways of acquiring and using systems, while the old ways stay with us, and that again requires integration, requires adaptability of solutions, but it also is changing how business gets done. And as that changes as well, the finance systems have to not only be able to adapt to it, but be able to anticipate and be able to grow, change, modify and do it cost effectively as time goes on. Well, that brings us to our what I believe is our last data slide for this session, and it's our poll question as well. What is it? Given this climate of change, this climate of accelerating business and technology change and preferences, what is it that finance has to have from cloud solutions? So we're going to show you what the survey said and talk about that, but first we'd like to find out what you have to say. So they're giving us 45 seconds to answer the poll question that is should be on the right side of your screen. Of the following, please rank or the top three, or select the top three needs that must be met for your organization to be a true advocate of moving to cloud or SaaS financials. Security concerns, significant cost savings, proven solution, integrate easily, functional benefits over the current systems, robust and relevant advanced analytic capabilities, easy upgrades. Now we have, I've heard the tone, and it looks like our poll has ended. It's going to take a few seconds for them to, for Kirk to pull everything together, and we'll take a look at what everybody has to say. Go ahead, Bill.
I was hoping to hear some of that music. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, there are licensing requirements everywhere, I guess. Here we go. All right. What a shock, Bill. Security concerns is number one.
Fascinating. Well, I think that's exactly right. Security, security, security. I think the interesting issue on security is whether that is founded in reality or is that more of an emotional issue. In my experience, most cloud producers have better security than 99% of all companies, and they pass all these rigorous mandates to ensure security compliance. There are other issues related to regulatory issues and cross-border data transfer issues that sometimes can get complicated on an international scenario basis. But in terms of just basic data security, access security, I think this is more of a, we've been running these surveys for a lot of years, as Bruce and I mentioned. Security is always going to be at the top. It has always been at the top list, will always be, but I don't know how much of that is reality and how much of it is emotional.
Yeah, well, one of the things is, as long as there is data, there has to be, levels of security, integrity, quality control, and things like that. And, it should be the top concern, not necessarily the top obstacle, but the top concern. And just to reinforce one thing that Bill said, and we'll move to our data slide here, the cloud solutions that are out there today, especially the ones that have been, built and architected in most recent years, are quite literally built from the electrons up, from the code up, from, the smallest piece of hardware up, to be as secure as the most secure data center that you could possibly imagine, and probably then some. And so that's one of the reasons why the major concerns about security and viability have been really overcome at this point. And there's a trend toward getting more and more getting the IT department involved as these cloud systems move more and more toward, as Bill mentioned, core systems of record, the core enterprise money applications and functionalities. IT, we find, as a group, as an entity, as a department, is becoming more and more willing and able to educate business leaders, including the finance leaders, on the vastly increased scope and capabilities of today's cloud systems. So if I could have
go ahead, Bill. We've got a couple of comments from our audience said that they didn't have enough time, and while they picked security first, they didn't have enough time to read all the answers. So it's interesting at a very minimum that security was the first pick. Another point, and then why don't we open it up and look at what our survey of 271 said. But, what's fascinating is earlier this week, I don't know if people are aware of this, but there is for those of you that are in the public sector, you'd be more aware of this, but the federal RAMP program recently just, I think this week, announced that Amazon had met all of the security, not concerns, but mandates to be able to be approved by FedRAMP. So, I mean, that's a major statement in and of itself that the federal government is now pre-qualified. Amazon, one of the largest cloud infrastructure, if not the largest, I think they're doing $4 billion a year in infrastructure, hosting, et cetera.
It's pretty impressive, and actually, Amazon is they're the elephant in the room that's going to help change the what goes on, especially in terms of how larger enterprises and organizations perceive and utilize cloud. All right, in the background, I was trying to line up a drum roll. I couldn't find it, so I'll just unveil the chart. And I'd like everybody to take a look at the bar chart on the right-hand side and compare it with the bar chart on the left-hand side. You will note that from top to bottom, with one minor exception, the functional benefits over on-premise solutions, that came in a little bit lower than both robust and ease of integration. But it's almost a mirror. It's a duplicate, basically, of what the larger audience of IT and finance executives told us that they're looking for. I think that makes it a very good sample, and I think that means that we have the right people on the phone today. And it gives us a go-to-market laundry list. This is what Cloud Finance Solutions should provide. These are the table stakes. You have to start with being able to address the security concerns, and being able to make us understand how you as a cloud provider will address those. And security includes not just data, but access, control, quality, all these capabilities, in addition to protecting and allowing controlled access and use of the data. Cost savings, obviously, big one. Proven solutions, and we're getting more and more of them in the market every day. Integratability, it's not just with the existing on-premise systems, but with all the other cloud things that we're bringing in as well. So very interesting. Thank you very much for participating in the poll. And it does appear that the sample that we had very much matches up with the sample for today's webinar.
Bruce, let me make one final point before we
Sure.
go on to the next final set of slides. What's really interesting, in particular around finance, as I mentioned earlier, these waves. We had the early wave, and then of sales and marketing and HCM. Now we're moving into finance. Ultimately, the fourth wave will be manufacturing, although we're very early there, in particular shop floor. But what I think is interesting in finance is really thinking about what have been the entry points, and we've had point solutions and around discrete functions like budgeting and planning. And what's interesting now is the transition to more core systems of record.
It's getting better. It's getting the producers, the providers, the services, the systems, the interfaces, and of course the underlying technology is continuing to improve very rapidly as well. Bill, you recall that at our annual Cloud Business Summit in New York City last year, there were at least a couple of CIOs and CTOs who basically announced to the crowd that, in many cases, what we know or what we think we know about cloud capabilities, security, the technologies, and everything in between is between 6 and 12 months old on average when you get into the typical enterprise organization. And as they said, that makes it out of date because the pace of change and improvement within cloud by the cloud providers, the technologists, the developers, and so on is so rapid. With a new release every 6 to 4 months in some cases. Keeping up is sometimes a challenge, but is required and it is necessary. And so I'd like to reiterate the need for getting and keeping the IT leadership in organizations involved as well, because they more and more are becoming the repository of knowledge, insight, and guidance that we in finance will need to help us make these decisions and to help us make sure that a transition to cloud is as smooth and uneventful as possible.
I think that's a good point. If you look back 2-3 years ago, in some ways, IT organizations were often, in some ways, threatened by cloud, but they now have a kind of a footprint of experience behind them and have been actively engaged with many of these other functional domains and can act as a real partner with finance as it relates to what is the best fit, how do you manage data, how do you manage security, and have a number of implementations often under their belts.
So if we're going to sum up, how does the cloud fit what we need, what our changing needs are? Well, first and foremost, flexibility, adaptability. The business is changing around us. The world is changing, growing, and shifting around us. We have to stay the same and change at the same time. And when finance changes, it changes every aspect of the business. So change has to be architected for business and technological change, and I probably should have said minimal disruption as well. And of course, we want the low cost. We have to have low cost, especially compared to what are our alternatives. Another question that comes up a lot in our annual Cloud Business Summit is, all right, there's the cost of our traditional systems, and we have a lot of sunk costs and familiarities, and we have the skill sets, developed and evolved for that. And so, we can keep investing in that, or we can move to cloud, or we can do nothing. And in almost every case that we've seen, the cost of doing nothing or the cost of keeping, maintaining, upgrading, and improving the existing systems tends to be several times more expensive than moving to the cloud. Again, here we go. Non-disruptive, incremental change and improvement. So we can go with either a big bang solution or we can go with an incremental sort of sequential over time solution or somewhere in between. The best solutions allow us to do this. The best solutions also adapt to and leverage, allow us to utilize our legacy data. That was one concern that we haven't seen recently, but still is out there when we get into conversations with just about the head of just about any line of business, finance or otherwise. What's going to happen with my legacy data? Can I use it? Can I access it? Can I use it the way I want to? That's something that you need to be that has to be included. And finally, it's got to be architected for security, reliability, and adaptability. It can't be too rigid, but it has to be rigid enough to comply and to enable and require compliance with everything that we need to comply with. But it also has to be able to change, adapt, and grow as our roles change and as the enterprise, its leadership, its markets, its offerings, and so on grow and change. So what do we do about it? What are the action items? We're going to go through this list, and then I'm going to turn things back over to our moderator, facilitator, Bill Sinnott, for a few moments, and then we will move to the Q&A. So please stay tuned for Q&A after we go through the next several items. The first thing you need to do, educate yourself and your company on the benefits and business case of running finance in the cloud. It is happening. And it's a lot easier to find the information that you need. As we mentioned before, one place that you really should turn, if you have an internal IT organization, what we're finding more and more, and this survey really reinforced that, IT groups are improving as a source of cloud information and insight. And as self-serving as it may sound, one other thing that we found in years of researching who the most effective and trusted sources of information are is that the vendors themselves, the providers themselves. The more established providers who have been in and around the cloud or who built themselves in the cloud especially are going to be significant sources of case studies, business case foundations, and comparative information that you can use to understand and then to refine or to build and refine your own case for moving to the cloud. And evaluate your existing systems versus your needs. Mind the gap. At Saugatuck, we've developed a very simplistic but amazingly effective methodology that we call the effectiveness gap. And that is simply looking at what your business goals are and then realistically assessing, all right, can my existing systems allow me or enable me to meet those goals in the time that I have available? In most cases, they either can't or they can't allow you to do it in an effective amount of time. And that's the effectiveness gap between what your systems can do and what you need to do. So do your systems really deliver on the business needs that you have? Can they meet your business management needs 2 years from now, 5 years from now? Because in finance, that's often the time frames that we work in, as well as getting everything done right now. Can we adapt to growth and expansion? And can we analyze performance now and in the future? Or are our systems limiting us to what has already happened? And finally, look for opportunities to make the move. We noted earlier that there are a variety of events and changes, what we call business triggers, that tend to make it compelling and often easier to change, to shift, and to move what it is you do and where you do it from on-premise to the cloud. Do you have a new CFO or a new CEO looking to change or improve finance or enterprise performance in general? Cloud is a terrific way to enable that. Is there significant business growth or expansion? Do you have your current systems? Have they pretty much reached, or are you facing their end of useful life or the end of support, which a lot of organizations are, especially over the last several years? Are you facing major upgrade, maintenance, and support costs? These are all very important triggers that will help you make the decision and will help you make the case for cloud if cloud is the right thing for you to do. So with that, I'd like to turn things over to our moderator, Bill Sinnott of the FEI, and then we will move to Q&A. Bill?
Okay, thanks, Bruce. And I think at this point we should thank Bill McNee and Bruce Guptill from Saugatuck Technology. Just as an aside, when I first met Bill McNee, I think it was, Bill, 5-6 years ago, when we had the Research Foundation ask Saugatuck to do a research survey for us. To be honest, I didn't even know what cloud was, and today you see TV advertisements of cloud. Everyone's talking cloud. That shows how fast things are moving. But here's a little bit about Saugatuck. They're based in Westport, Connecticut. You have their email address there, saugatucktechnology.com, telephone number, and they're actually going to have a Cloud Business Summit in September. For more information, you can see the website there to get more information. And if we go on to the next slide, we want to thank our sponsor today, Workday, a leading provider of enterprise cloud applications for both human resources and finance. Just founded in 2005, and I think that's when just before things started moving with cloud. They have human capital management and financial management applications, and whether it's very small companies or Fortune 50 enterprises, many companies have used Workday. So with that, Bill McNee, I'll turn it back to you and let you answer some of the questions. I noticed there's a couple questions here on customizing software, and exactly the question I was going to ask, so I'll let you dive in there, Bill.
Yeah, we've got a number of questions here. Let me start off with a question around customization that was asked. Maybe I'll be the one to start off and answer it, Bruce, and you can add to it. It asks, can you customize solutions with a cloud environment? So, the world, as Bruce had mentioned, cloud has kind of evolved dramatically over time. Just as we've gone through waves of functional adoption, we've seen an evolution of how cloud architectures have evolved. And in the early days, solutions were often islands of automation, and we added a lot of integration capabilities, In those earlier days, it was more, the buzzword was often around quote-unquote configuration, when today, actually, most of the more sophisticated cloud solutions, and clearly Workday fits this mold, provides you not only the ability to configure it, but likewise to provide a significant amount of customization to meet your needs. Yesteryear's solutions really weren't very customizable. Today's environments and platforms, and most of these cloud providers are really providing a much richer platform around which to deploy their solutions, do have very, very rich customization requirements. I will say, however, that a lot of times people have done a lot of customization that isn't always, when you go back and re-implement it, staying cleaner and closer to standard business practices and or processes or industry best practices, because that's what's being implemented in the new solutions. I mean, we don't necessarily want to go back and re-implement what was codified in 1985 or 1990. Things have changed since then. So taking advantage of these updated business processes and best practices is often a best practice and does help keep the client more current with the solution over time. Is kind of an industry best practice. Bruce, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think actually that's you've touched on really what I think is one of the most important parts, and that is that the short answer is yes. Any good cloud solution, the best cloud solutions are quite customizable and configurable to your needs, but the very best ones incorporate not only the latest practices, policies, and they allow you to set the rules that you need to follow for your own organization. In other words, the accounting, ledger, AR, AP, and so on. But they also allow you to reset them and adapt them over time much more rapidly and much more exactly and accurately than traditional systems have allowed us to do. So when it comes to customization, it's really about it's less about the technology. It's less about customizing the technology and more about being able to customize how you use the technology and what you use it for. The other aspect of customization is typically we've had to traditionally develop or adapt a wide variety of technologies, especially software code and data, to allow us to access and utilize data from a variety of different organizations, different departments, of course, different systems. And what today's cloud capabilities enable, or what they deliver, is typically a series of interfaces, APIs and other things that allow us to go in, grab the data from where it is, and utilize it the way we want it, regardless of the system. Sometimes these need to be revised or improved, but increasingly, with the solutions and the technologies that are being used by the developers of cloud solutions today, we have to do less and less customization, and we have to do less and less adaptation on our own, which is good news for finance and for the IT organizations.
So another area of question, we had several, so I'm going to kind of try to adapt the questions into one unified kind of theme. Is really around this idea of entry points and how are people getting started, in particular in core systems of record. And in my experience, a big question to ask yourself is how old and how current is your existing core finance system, and whether it has stayed current relative to new release cycles, et cetera, et cetera. So, whether you implemented years ago Oracle or PeopleSoft or SAP or whatever it might be, if you haven't been staying current, in some ways you're kind of locked down in your existing footprint, and it hasn't really allowed the system to continue to grow and evolve. So that's one particular scenarios where we've seen even corporate deployments of cloud-based core systems of record are in those scenarios. And the other one that we're seeing as a very popular or a use case that in some ways is equal to, if not greater than, a centralized core system of record is at the divisional or regional level, where there might be a need in Asia or Europe or around some new product line extension, where a two-tier consolidation or budget or roll-up strategy is deployed. We have one particular client, I won't, in the interest of confidentiality, who started that way with a cloud-based alternative and ended up starting in Asia because the division, which controlled about 20% of revenue, is about a $5 billion company. They started there, implemented in a couple other regional divisions, and over time will replace the existing centralized corporate footprint that is with one of the legacy vendors. So it really depends on what is the state of your current environment, what's the right entry point. Whatever you need to do, it needs to show quick value, it needs to show high return, high payback, solve a very specific set of business needs, and these are often the entry points that most companies start. Bruce, any comment on that?
No, it's really about, I hate to say picking your battles, right? But it's really picking your beachheads. There are solutions that enable broad and immediate improvement there's a term that that I like to use called tactically strategic, and that basically allow us to make the investments we need now to anchor, if you will, what we need to do, where we need to do it, and then incrementally improve that over time, whether by adding modularity or increasingly by the frequent upgrades and release cycles, which is a key benefit to cloud-based solutions that we haven't talked about, and we won't belabor at this point. But the fact is that where, to use Bill's example, for example, Oracle, PeopleSoft, whoever, would typically do a significant major upgrade and change every 2 or 3 or 4 years, that would typically require a significant amount of reprogramming of system downtime, interruption, and disruption. This gets done behind the scenes by the cloud provider without affecting how we do business, without affecting our systems, without affecting what we do, how we manage it, without reducing or disrupting our productivity or changing the value that we can deliver. And it gets rolled out automatically through the cloud from the provider to us, and it typically happens on a much more regular and frequent basis, so that the changes, the improvements, and therefore the value that we can deliver continues to improve over time, and we don't have to do anything.
So I guess in the interest of time, we'll address, we got a couple other questions around analytics and big data. So why don't we address that a bit? It's interesting, in a separate study from the work that we did that Workday commissioned, Saugatuck recently completed its own, as Bruce had mentioned, our 2013 Cloud Business Survey. And by the way, if you're interested in some of those results, just go to our website, saugatucktechnology.com, and sign up for our research alerts, and you'll start getting a distribution, and we'll be able to get you copies of some of those survey results. But what's interesting from some of that recent work is we asked around different functional domains which of these new technologies would have the highest impact. Is it cloud? Is it mobile? Is it social? Is it analytics? And in finance in particular, it was around cloud business solutions and advanced analytics. The combination of those two technologies. Mobile was important. Social really wasn't that important, but cloud plus analytics. So let's talk a little bit about big data, Bruce, and how organizations are leveraging big data and advanced analytics these days.
There we go, mute button. It's just the basic, definition of big data very quickly. It's not just big, huge chunks of data, right? It's all the streams of data of different formats, structured, unstructured, and so on, that are coming at us from all these different systems. It's rare to find any CFO or any executive who has anything to do with systems and software that complains that we don't have enough data. Usually we have too much data. We just don't know what it is. We don't know how to use it. And we're not able to use it effectively enough to deliver the value that we need and to improve our ability to deliver value. That's what big data analytics allows us to do, whether it's integrated into a particular solution or it's something that is, let's call it off to the side or a separate set of functionalities that in turn integrates via various types of interfaces. The bottom line is that finance is the perfect department, the perfect environment to benefit from analytics because we have to get that information. And the biggest, most important, I think, and Bill, you can check me on this if you'd like, but I think one of the biggest trends and most important things that big data analytics, advanced data analytics allows us to do today is the predictive analytics. It's not just about looking at what happened in the past. It's about what's going on now, what we can expect to see in the future, and the systems that allow us to do that are going to be some of the most valuable.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. And our current systems just are not as equipped to handle an evolving mission in this regard. And clearly the combination of cloud-based business solutions and more advanced analytics, including big data, clearly help address that. Let me just close before I turn it back to Bill Sinna. There was a couple interesting observations made from our participants. One participant said that most companies spend 70% of their time maintaining existing systems, leaving only 30% of the time for new business solution investment, while cloud flips this equation around. Yeah, that's very consistent. Typically, most IT spend is 80% on turning the lights on and fixing the stuff. So that would be very, very true. And the impact on IT really is a changing mission for IT, as it's more about managing these resources rather than owning the assets and doing all this customization. So we've done a lot of work in that regard at Saugatuck. Feel free to go to our website and or just email us, and we'll be happy to point you to some resources in that regard. So let me pass it back to Bill Sennett.
Okay, Bruce and Bill, we thank you for your presentation today. We're at the top of the hour, and we want to thank all the participants today. We appreciate your questions and your interest in the topic. And Kirk, let me pass it back to you for closing.
Thank you very much for a terrific presentation. This concludes our webinar. You may now disconnect.